Good evening, and thank you for joining our series of conversations on mental health offered by the Sioux Falls School District with experts from Avera. My name is Jeremy Mollett, and tonight we will focus on the topic of digital media. Over the past 2.5 years, the pandemic forced many children and teens to spend much more time at home, away from friends and activities. This led to an increase in screen time and social media usage. Tonight, we will share some helpful advice on how the rise of digital media is affecting children, how to address this with them, and what levels of care are available. At this time, I'd like to introduce Dr. James Knoll, Assistant Superintendent of the Sioux Falls School District, to offer a welcome.
Good evening. On behalf of the Sioux Falls School District, I want to again welcome you to this 9-part presentation that is titled the Family Forum Series. Tonight's presentation is the third in the series and focuses on the use of digital media. But before we get started, I want to take this opportunity to thank Avera for their partnership with us in providing this service to our families. It is greatly appreciated. Families, you are welcome to join us on the third Tuesday of each month to hear information on a variety of topics that are intended to strengthen and support our families. You will also gain knowledge and resources that exist right here in our community that may provide help for you and your family. And now I look forward to hearing from our presenter, and please do not hesitate to provide us feedback on the Sioux Falls School District Let's Talk app. That can be found on the Sioux Falls School District website. Thank you again, and now back to Mr. Mollett to introduce this evening's presenter.
Thanks, Dr. Knoll. We'll now move to the presentation. We are pre-recording this session, so we'll not be taking live questions, but we will leave some time at the end to address some of the top concerns we hear from parents. Tonight's program will be presented by Dr. Wallace Jackman. Dr. Jackman is the Director of Psychology at Avera and is also a licensed clinical psychologist and social worker. Welcome, Dr. Jackman, and thank you for presenting.
Welcome. I appreciate the opportunity to present tonight on digital media. All right, digital media. So we're going to be talking about research, be touching on some issues related to research. One of the key aspects of research is this is really coming to fruition now because smartphones really didn't get developed till about 2007. So we really only have a good 13 to 15 years, I'd probably say 10 to 15 years of good research about the implications related to social media. Prior to this point, folks had to get on their home computer to look on social media or whatnot. Even back in the day before Facebook, folks had to get on their home computer, whereas because of the advent of the cell phone, we now have access to the same things we had on a home computer. And so some of the more popular social media sites for children and adolescents are YouTube, Snapchat, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. And we know from research that 77% of adolescents have a cell phone, and 95% of teens from 12 to 17 use the internet. Now, whenever I speak with people, I say, what is these percentages? What does that research really mean to you as a consumer, you as a parent? It means that if you have 100 kids in a school or in a classroom, 95 of those kids from 12 to 17 are accessing the internet. We also know from research they've done with folks that have been separated from their smartphones and doctors, physicians hook them up to devices, they were able to find out that when they were separated from their smartphones, they had some of the same physiological withdrawal symptoms that folks might have when they're withdrawing from certain benzodiazepines or medications or drugs. So there is a physiological withdrawal, which could explain part of the reason why when you're trying to separate your child from their smartphone or take it out of their hands, there's going to be a response, and some of it's physiological. Increases anxiety. And so based upon a report by the American Academy of Pediatrics, in 1970, so this was 50 years ago, which makes me feel old, 50 years ago, kids at 4 years of age were exposed to TV, and they were concerned about that at that time. Now children are exposed to digital media starting at 4 months of age. And so that's significant because their brains are still developing, and they likely they should not be accessing digital media at that early of an age. And I'll talk a little bit later about what the age ranges should be, and what's the typical amount of time children based upon their age should be exposed to screen time. We know that 80% of internet users report SNS as social, accounts for approximately 1/4 of the total time spent online. Why is that significant? As we look at all this research, that's one thing I really try to expound upon is why is that significant? Because just Facebook alone, the average American spends approximately 50 minutes per day just on Facebook. So if they have Facebook, they're spending 50 minutes on average per day on Facebook. That's average. So that means there's some people that are spending 2 or 3 hours on Facebook. And so if 80%, we just say an hour, to round an hour, of internet use is spent online, that means these folks that have Facebook, the kids that you have that are looking at Facebook, they're spending 15, 20 minutes just on Facebook each day. 90% of young adults in the US use social media. I don't think that comes as a surprise to anybody. And the majority of users visit sites at least once a day. And I think that's an underestimate. It's typically more than that. And then we also know they spend 54% of their time online using social media. And when we talk about social media, I'm going to skip forward here, is we're talking about these sites. Facebook, like I said, 50 minutes a day. That doesn't include just children. That includes adolescents and adults too, about 50 minutes per day. Imagine the productivity that is being wasted because of time on social media. Then Instagram, that's typically photos and video sharing. If you're not familiar with that social media site, you know what Facebook is. Twitter, in fact, Twitter is kind of a news-focused microblogging site. Sometimes there was a New York Times columnist that described Twitter as a news feed on steroids. So it's very engaging and addicting to folks. Snapchat is for private conversations. When my children, they're adults now, but when Snapchat was first out, my 2 youngest, I didn't know Snapchat was secret from other people, meaning that when they're chatting on Snapchat, you don't have the capabilities as a parent to see what it is they sent unless they take a picture of the screen. So once they send that message, there's no log of messages or contacts like you do with your typical smartphone messaging app. So when they're using Snapchat, they can send pictures and messages to each other, and you have absolutely no ability to see what it is they sent or they received. Twitter and Reddit are common sources of news. LinkedIn is a site for occupational, getting jobs, posting employment kinds of information. Tumblr is more for pictures and whatnot. Instagram and Pinterest are about artistic and craft related aspirations. And so I'm going to back up just a little bit because I want to go back to this last slide, is that I said young people spend 54% of their time online. I wanted to talk about electronic intrusion because it's very common for young people. It's a common form of digital dating abuse, meaning it's a way to repeatedly use social media to harass, pressure, threaten, or coerce a dating partner or an ex-dating partner. It's not uncommon for folks that they break up with somebody, they didn't like this person, they don't like their best friend's girlfriend, so they'll electronically intrude upon other people's social media sites. It's really a form of cyberbullying in which I've had cases in which young people, they didn't like their ex-boyfriend, so they'd come up with 5 dummy accounts, meaning 5 email accounts that they just made up on their own so that they could get 5 different Facebook accounts and then use these dummies or these fake accounts to harass or abuse another individual on their wall, on their Facebook wall, or on their Instagram posts. And so total entertainment screen use among tweens and teens, so between 2019, 2021, you can see the increased amount of screen time, and that increase has exploded in just the past 2 years than it was seen in the previous 4 years. And well, why is that? Again, when you look at research, I'm like, what does that mean? Why is that important to know? Part of the reason why that's increased is because, one, data speeds and download speeds have increased. The phones are faster and provide better picture quality, and you can do more things with them. I mean, when I first had my first flip phone, I didn't even think we could take pictures with a flip phone. And so, boy, when you could start taking pictures, then you carried it around more. I was going through my old junk drawer, and I seen that I had these old they're not old cameras, they're only about 10 years old. The point and shoot cameras, people don't carry those around anymore because your cell phone has the ability to take photos as well as that does. And so because of that ability to take movies, take moving pictures, to take photos that are as high a quality as some video cameras and point and shoot cameras from 12 years ago, that means people have an all-in-one device. They don't need to carry those other devices around as much. So that means they're going to be using them much more. And then you compound that with the social media sites are built for you to post pictures, then that's great. You've got your photo, you got your camera, and you've got your phone and ability to post on social media all in the palm of your hand. And so that's why those numbers have increased over the past 2 to 3 years, because of the qualities of the phone. FOMO, if you haven't heard this term before, fear of missing out. It's a fear that other people are having fun without you. We all have encountered this. We all have neighbors or friends or colleagues that we see posting stuff on Facebook, and you got left out. They didn't invite you to the party. They went to Hawaii. You didn't know they were going. And so that fear of missing out is part of the reason why we all, including teenagers, but it's even more profound for teenagers, want to get on the phone to make sure they're not missing out on something. So it's a pervasive apprehension that others might be having rewarding experiences, and I'm absent from it. And I have this desire to stay connected with what other people are doing. Well, again, why is that important? Because FOMO drives overuse of technology. It means because I fear that I'm missing out on something, then I'm going to use it even more. And so it's becoming a catalyst for FOMO, and hence that increases stress and anxiety. So we know research clearly supports that there's a correlation, there's a link between the amount of time that you're on social media and your degree of anxiety or depression. There's a direct link. Now, there are some positive aspects of social media. There's a purposeful use. So for example, on Pinterest, when I was building my deck outside, I built a nice deck last summer. I can go on Pinterest and see some of the rail designs and see what some of the stair designs are. And so it can be purposeful. I can engage in a private message with a community that has some of the same issues or problems that I might have, such as depression, or there could be some humorous content or creativity. So there are some positive aspects to social media. But on the other hand, extensive use of social network sites, it might weaken existing close family relationships and interactions. It can decrease one's interactions with other people and with their family. They can lead to negative online experiences, like I said earlier, about cyberbullying, or fewer in-person social interactions. The more time I spend on my cell phone, the less time I'm spending interacting with other people. And also, we know from research, it decreases one's ability to sustain attention. This is important because if you have someone in your family, and we're talking about children and adolescents, that we know there's a certain percentage of those kids have either ADHD, depression, or anxiety. Well, guess what one of the common symptoms are related to all three of those diagnoses? Poor concentration, inattentiveness, inability to pay attention. So if I want my child's depression or anxiety to decrease, I want them to be have less ADHD symptoms, I likely need to decrease their time on social networking sites. There are several studies show an association of time spent on social networking sites and lower grade point average, lower self-esteem, higher depression. Saying some of the same things I've just said, but I'm adding 2 more points here, is if your child is grade point average is decreasing, slipping, not getting as good grades, one of the first things I'd look at is how much time are they spending on social networking sites? How much time are they posting stuff online and reading what other people have to say? If they're spending too much time, there's a direct correlation to their grade point average dropping and their self-esteem. Again, why is that important? Because if you have a child that has a persistent depressive disorder, dysthymia, major depression, one of the symptoms of those disorders is low self-esteem or feelings of guilt or worthlessness. And so you want to contribute to their depression, let the child stay online more. You want to decrease that, decrease the amount of time they're on social networking sites. Some teens become so obsessed and absorbed in their virtual world that they lose the drive to relate to social life in the real world. This is important because if we're dealing with kids that are isolated, depressed, anxious, one of our primary interventions, meaning things we do as clinicians to try to treat their depression or anxiety, is we want them to connect with other people. It's called behavioral activation. It's one of the primary things we do to treat depression or anxiety, is get the person to become more active outside of their home, interacting with positive, constructive individuals or activities. Young adults experience considerable anxiety when their access to texting is restricted and report feeling stressed and guilty when they don't reply to a message immediately. I don't think that comes as a surprise to any parent that has a child with a smartphone. You already know that they become horribly anxious and sometimes guilty when you try to restrict the time that they have with their cell phone. In fact, I know some kids have gone so far as to make threats to run away from home or hurt themselves because their parent restricted access to their cell phone. Not uncommon. I'm probably like talking to somebody out there. I won't read through all of this, but the primary things I'm going to talk about is in bold. It says if someone used 7 to 11 platforms, they had more than 3 times the odds of reporting high levels of anxious symptoms. This is extremely important for those of you that have a family history of anxiety or a mood disorder. That means that's about 25% of you that I'm talking to out there. Or you have someone that actively has anxiety or depression. If they're using 7 to 11 platforms, meaning 7 to 11 social networking sites, you say, well, that's a lot, Dr. Jackman. I don't think they use 7. Well, if you use Facebook, you have 3 or 4 right there. Because you have your Facebook, you have your Facebook wall, you have Marketplace, you have Farmville, you have all of these different aspects of Facebook. Those count as platforms. So 7 to 11 platforms, all it would take is Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and maybe Snapchat. Boom, they got 7. They have they're going to increase anxiety 3 times higher than somebody that isn't using any social networking at all. We know kids that are cyberbullied are more likely to think about or commit suicide. So if you have a young person, maybe it's a neighbor, maybe it's a family member, and they say they're being bullied online or people are posting negative stuff about them online, you want to take that seriously. Don't blow that off and say, well, it's just social media, sticks and stones may break your bones. Don't blow that off because it's much more significant online because in our day, well, I sound like an old man. Well, I am. So in my day, when somebody teased you or bullied you, it only 3 or 4 or 5, maybe 15 people knew about it. Social media, it might go to thousands of people. It might stream to the entire school. Now the entire school knows what this person said about the other individual. So it's much more extreme online than it was face-to-face when we were growing up. A quarter of adolescents report sleep interruptions from incoming text messages. So they feel pressure to answer that text message. And that contributes to FOMO, which we talked about earlier, that fear of missing out, like they're going to miss out on something. So what do we need to do? How do we make this safer for our children? You're doing some of that right now as you're watching this. is you're educating yourself on some of the platforms that are out there. You need to educate it even more. Like I said, 7 years ago, I had no idea Snapchat, I couldn't go to look at my kid's phone and see who they're messaging. Doesn't show it. Learn how they use social media or why they want to use it. Why is that important to them? If possible, depending upon your carrier, you can set privacy settings. I know, I won't say which one of my children, but one of my children was getting a D in gym, and he or she was pretty athletic. I was like, how are you getting a D in gym? Like, really? Well, I looked at his phone. Yeah, it was him. I looked at his phone and it was on his phone during school hours. I'm like, what are you doing on your phone during gym? So I had to restrict the settings for that he could only make emergency calls when he was at school. You as a parent have the capabilities to do those setting changes on some carriers. Look for signs of distress, of concerning behavior. So that's what we're referring to when we look at depression or anxiety. So for example, some of the symptoms of depression or anxiety might be their concentration's poor, their memory, having memory problems, they're getting forgetful, they're becoming more irritable, they're not sleeping well, they're having appetite problems. Well, any signs like that, you want to be looking for those. And they could be directly attributed to how much social media or screen time that they're using. Check in with yourself. I mean, be honest. How much are you using or misusing your cell phone? Kind of hard to tell the kids not to pick up their phone, not to be being on social media when I, as a parent, am doing the same thing. There are some applications. Here we're talking about screen time, but there are actually some good apps that you can, most are free. But as I put these on the screen, I'm not advertising for them. I don't get paid by these folks. But these are some of the different apps, just examples that you can download onto your phone or onto your kid's phone that monitor how much time you spend on certain websites. And some of them allow you to block some of those. And I know kids can be pretty savvy, so they can unblock some of those things. So that may not work. But for the children that really want to decrease some of that, or the adults, young adults, there are apps. You'd be surprised. Well, you've all done it, where you go down that rabbit hole. You're just going to look at Auntie M's vacation pictures, and the next thing you know, you've been on your phone for 63 minutes. Kids do the exact same thing. You go, then you know you've wasted 2 hours. Institute a no email zone, like times you're not going to look at email, or a kid's not going to look at their cell phone. Most parents, including myself, we have a no cell phone zone when it's time to eat, when we're at a restaurant or we're eating at home. No cell phones at that time. Limit or remove numerical components of social media like tweets or likes. You can do that. And you can have your kids do that too, is don't put your personality or how popular you are based upon how many likes or tweets or retweets that you're getting from your social media. This is a big one. I don't know if I have another slide on this. I don't have the slides that I wanted to regarding cell phone use by the bed, but do not charge your phone by your bed. Keep phones out of the bedroom. Why? Because research has shown that the blue light or just even having the phone close to you with an arm's length distance of your bed will disturb your sleep-wake cycle. Again, that's important for folks that have depression or anxiety, because that's one of the symptoms of depression, is difficult with either difficulty falling asleep, or staying asleep, or sleeping too long. And sometimes that sleeping too long is because they didn't sleep at all overnight. So if you can, get them to not charge their phones by their bed. Now, I know there's going to be the young person. I've counseled young people too. They're like, well, I use my cell phone for my alarm clock. That's the one I always hear all the time, to wake me up. As if Walmart still doesn't sell alarm clocks. There's still alarm clocks that you can purchase that you can use to wake yourself up. You don't need your phone to do that. If that's too much of a fight, you turn off cell phone and site notifications. Just turn those off in the settings. Kids know how to do that. Setting a timer on how long that they're on their phone. You can do the same thing for yourselves. Again, I think you'd be shocked how long you might be using your screen time each day. If you tracked it, you're probably going to be close to that 50-minute to hour-and-a-half range that research supports. Behavioral activation involves engagement in adaptive, gratifying, pleasurable activities. So what I alluded to earlier is we know that it helps decrease clinical depression, getting people active and busy. But it's hard to ride your bicycle if you're trying to look at Facebook posts on your phone. For young people, connecting the screen world to the real world. So for example, you see this young guy in the picture here. Well, if you're going to let this, I'm going to guess he's probably 5 to 6 years old or so. If you're going to let this 5 or 6 year old look at something online or some social media site, and maybe he's looking at something to do with race cars or NASCAR or IndyCar racing or something. Well, he spent 20 minutes looking at that. Now take him down to the auto body shop. Take him to a tires place that replaces tires. Make the screen time connect to something that's in the real world. Encourage media that is slower paced, that allows for decision making, memory formation, and communication. The more quicker paced it is, especially for young children, the more likely that's going to engage their mind. So they're going to be more almost hypnotized to it. So you want content that is more slower paced, that it stops and they have to answer some questions or they have to think about it. You don't want just this fast paced stuff all the time. The screen time should focus on the content of the app rather than the technology. So as I just said, connecting it to the real world. And then the APA, our American Academy of Pediatrics, says kids shouldn't be exposed to screens before the age of 2. And I've seen some other research that have said the exact same thing. Limiting it to no more than 2 hours a day, it could damage their ability to interact in face-to-face conversations. You've all seen this one where in fact, my 2 youngest was doing this one time when they were teenagers. Is I said, who are you 2 texting? You know, we're sitting waiting, we're at the restaurant waiting to go eat. They're gonna have to put their cell phones away. And they were texting each other. I'm like, you guys are sitting right next to each other. Like, why are you texting each other? Just talk to her, she's right there. Yeah, it's almost becoming, I wouldn't say an epidemic, that's probably too strong of a word, but it's becoming a social phenomenon, a social problem that young people don't know how to have good, strong face-to-face conversations and interactions anymore. And it's in part because of the smartphone. We should develop strategies for implementing household rules about media use, because rules have been linked to reduced levels of depression in young people. So another way you want to decrease depression, increase the rules linked to cell phone and social media use. You'd think that would be counterintuitive, that it would, just upset your kids. But and I know children, adolescents, even though they may not say it, they need structure. They dwell in structure. And if it's for their own good, they will thank you for that structure later down the road. We need to check their privacy settings and online profiles. You should be able to access their profiles. If not, they might be hiding something. Have those discussions regarding inappropriate posts, not necessarily inappropriate posts that they made. Of course, you want to talk about those, but inappropriate posts that other people made. And I'm not including just children or adolescents. Inappropriate posts that adults have made. Talking to them, why was that inappropriate, what that politician said? What made that sports person say that online? What do you think that reaction had on other people that are reading that? Have those kinds of conversations. Sometimes the best way to talk to kids about issues that they have is find other people that have the same issue and talk about those people. It's one of the common interventions I used, outpatient therapies. If a kid had a problem with not following rules at home, boy, trying to talk to that kid about the rules he's not following at home didn't get me very far. But if I talk about, Billy Bob that had that same problem and what happened to him, oh man, that kid's just totally engaged with me. And then they're able to learn from someone else's mistakes, even though they're making the exact same mistakes. We have to avoid overreacting and be approachable, be calm. And that's one thing I've told parents is you have to be, if you want those kids to talk to you about the problems they're having in school or problems they're having with their peers, you're going to have to be ready to hear some stuff you don't want to hear. And so if you overreact and get upset and angry, like, why are you doing that? Blah, 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 that kind of thing, they're probably not going to want to open up and talk to you anymore. They're just going to keep it quiet. They're just going to stuff it inside. So if that's what you're wanting from your young person, you have to be ready to be calm, approachable, and not overreact to what they're talking about. And in addition, rules concerning how much time is spent on the computer, I said this earlier, should be followed by teens and parents alike. We all sometimes get caught up, like I said, in that rabbit hole. We have to be careful to make certain that we're setting a good example for those teens and our young people. As parents, we need to do that. That includes cell phone use in the car, not answering text messages or phone calls in the car. Once those kids get adolescent and they get a driver's license, what example did we show them while we were in the car driving? And finally, last slide is electronic curfews, putting our own phones away, moving from monitoring use to actively restricting and structuring the use of their phone. Locking up the phones and tablets up at night. I know one parent that had to go so far as locking their kids' devices in the trunk of their car and hiding the keys, or taking their key during the summer, taking their cell phones to work with them. Or like I said earlier, blocking the hours they could use the phone, but they could still use the phone for emergency purposes. But even then, I know children are sometimes pretty tech savvy, and there's certain websites that they can use to still stay in touch with people or text people by text messaging. So I realize that won't work all the time, but even if you can make some restrictions, doing something is often better than doing nothing. And so the person who pays for the phone has the capacity to turn it off for periods of time. So you have that. If you're paying for it, you should be able to take care of it. I had one young person, well, I'm paying for my phone and I help pay the bill, so I should be able to use my phone. I said, well, who pays the electricity bill? So it's important to replace that media misuse with something else that is rewarding, because there is a intrinsic reward sometimes by getting those likes and getting feedback from their peers on their social media posts. That's kind of rewarding. So if you're going to restrict that, then we need to find something else to replace it with that is close to being that rewarding. And so that's what we have. A thank you from all of our behavioral health folks and Sioux Falls School District. And I also included some references. Those of you that like to read or research this a little bit better, the very first reference in alphabetical order is a book by Alter called Irresistible. Excellent, excellent book, easy read that speaks to some of the very things we've talked about today. There's some other really good references in here too, if you want to research this a bit more. And that's all I have for the presentation today.
Dr. Jackman, this is Jamie Nold. I work with the Sioux Falls School District, and one of the things I hear from the principals all the time is the use of social media and how it impacts the school, and sometimes in a negative way. We obviously use it as an educational tool at times, but it can be used in a negative way a lot of times as it impacts the students each day within the school and some conflicts that creates. And I know even with my own children, I'd put in place contracts when I bought their phone or other things, and at any point in time, I could look at what they had. And I don't know if I was too overbearing or if I wasn't too overbearing, but one of the questions we had from our counselors was, how involved should parents be? What's your advice on that as far as the children's use of social media? How ingrained and how involved in that use should the parent be?
Good question. I know, again, from personal experience, just from research, that it's almost impossible to get those young people off of their devices if they're left to their own devices. So during those times that they have the phone and I'm at work, or I'm out of earshot distance, it's going to be pretty difficult to control that, because many are probably more tech savvy than we are. So even if we put restrictions on their phone, they're likely just jump to another platform or whatnot. So what I've always said to folks is focus on the times that you do have control over it. So when the dinner table, when we're going on vacation, when we're home and they come straight home from school and they've got their book bag there, that's the time I've got some control. But again, I also want to have something else in my tool bag that I can pull out that replaces what they have. Otherwise, if I don't have something else going on, the first thing they're going to do is pick this thing up and start monkeying with it. And so I found that if I can have some other plans in place, we're going bowling. Nope, we're going to be raking leaves right now. You can't. We're going bicycle riding. Nope, can't use the phone right now. It's time for us to wash the car out in the driveway. If I can find some other things for them to do to replace it, that's great. And I think secondly, having those conversations with them about social media use. Something that went, I won't say tragically wrong, but something that will at least provoke some commentary on their part. So hopefully it provokes insight as to maybe it could be the amount of time somebody's using on social media, or some negative things, outcomes related to a person's use of social media. Those are a couple, 3 ideas.
Dr. Jackman, just one more question here that came in to us, and that question just deals with students. Really, they change so much or change so dynamically over time. How can parents identify that changes as being a normal change, or how do they address that over time, especially with regards to digital media? When they see some of those mood changes or some of those changes, how do they identify that and work with that specific to the use of social media?
That's a kind of broad question. The one refers to developmentally. Where are they, quote unquote, on the norms, so to speak, developmentally, versus it's reached a tipping point? I would still focus on those symptoms: irritability, sleep problems. Are they eating? Appetite? How are they getting along with their friends or peers or their siblings? Are they keeping their grades up? They're getting forgetful. They're getting their homework done. Regardless, I think that's from a second grader on up to a senior, that I'd focus on those kinds of things. And if I see any deterioration in those areas, that's when I'd likely want to have those conversations. Another thing I might keep in mind, and usually young people know, they may not admit it, but they know if they're gone over the tipping point of using their cell phone or social media too much, that I just have those conversations with them. I'd ask them, how much time do you think you should spend each day on all of your social network sites combined? And then challenge them to see if they're able to hit that. I've done that with a few students, and what I found is that they tend to want to restrict more than we might as a parent. So as a parent, I might say, you should limit that to 2 hours a day. If I ask them, they'll say, oh, probably 45 minutes to an hour. And then they find out they cannot comply with that 45 minutes to an hour. So some of it is just helping them gain insight on their own part, that they get better, because we know tweens and teenagers have issues with cause and effect, understanding, hey, if you do this, this, and this thing might happen. And so I think having those conversations with them to increase their insight and have them more self-reflective can sometimes be helpful.
Very good, Dr. Jackman. We greatly appreciate your time with us here today in this very important topic as we go through and discuss the use of digital media. And it's something that I know impacts our youth to a great extent, and obviously our adults as well. So we just thank you for your time and your expertise today. We will kick it over now to Jeremy just to finish this out for us.
Thank you.
Thank you to Dr. Jackman for presenting tonight's session on digital media. This session will be added to the Sioux Falls School District's website under counseling. Our next session will focus on gaming addiction, things to consider for parents, and how to help your child stay mentally resilient with all the different offerings when it comes to gaming. This will be presented on December 20th from 6 to 7 p.m. and login information will be under the counseling services area. Thank you for joining us and have a great night.